She's so good. Thank you so much. Jared, I love what you said. And I'm just so sorry that you sort of took a little of the air out of it by saying that sometimes politicians lie. It had a sincerity, it had a quality to it, it had values and virtues to it, which I hope someday to earn, Jared. Thank you very, very much for the warmth of that introduction. Let me acknowledge both you and Joelle for the extraordinary accomplishment that's represented by 5 years of this struggle and this effort. And let's call it what it is, a struggle and an effort, right? I want to thank Kelly Bates for her leadership. I want to thank all of the sponsors and hosts tonight, and maybe most especially the Jobin Leeds family. Greg reminded me just now that we found our way to each other through another candidate from Chicago with a funny name. And that candidate with a funny name is now the Democratic nominee for president. I'm very, very excited about that. Let me also acknowledge all of my partners in government who are here, all of my partners who are here who are looking to be in government. Come on down. Come on down. And in the spirit of the occasion, let me ask anybody who is not inside to come on inside. There is plenty of room here. I'll say to you what I say to people who visit the State House. The State House is your house. This room is your room tonight, so come on in. Listen, thank you for having me. I've got a text here I was thinking about working off of, but listening to Jarrett and listening to Kelly and to Joelle and looking around at the faces in this room, I think maybe I won't stick to that text. And maybe I'll tell you really why I am here. I'm here because of having learned through experience how to believe in what's possible, how not to accept things as they are. And I am constantly reminded by the faith and the repaying that comes from learning to believe in what's possible and working for it. A lot of you here know my story and remember it because it's like yours. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, as you know, not the Garden Spot. I grew up on welfare. I shared that room and that set of bunk beds with my mother and my sister, so you go from the top bunk to the bottom bunk to the floor, every third night on the floor. I have always loved to read, but I don't actually remember ever owning a book until I got my break in 1970 through a program called A Better Chance to Go to Milton Academy, where I got my first book and my first bed, for that matter. For me, that was like landing on a different planet. Now contrast that and imagine me sitting there a year ago watching our youngest daughter, Catherine, graduate from high school. Now her path to that milestone was radically different from mine, 30 some odd years before. She's always had her own room. Most of that time in the house in the leafy neighborhood where I used to deliver newspapers when I was a student at Milton Academy. By the time she got to high school, she had already traveled on 4 continents. She knew how to use and pronounce a concierge. She had shaken hands in the White House with the President of the United States. When Catherine was 5 years old and in kindergarten, they were studying the changes in the seasons. And she was sent home with a homework assignment of describing to Mom and Dad the 4 seasons. And so Catherine came home and described in accurate and minute detail her several visits to the Four Seasons Hotel in Washington, D.C. She said, first you drive up and the doorman takes your car. 5 years old. 1 generation. 1 generation. And the circumstances of our family were profoundly transformed. Now, that story doesn't get told as often as we'd like in this country, but it gets told more often in this country than any other place on earth. That story is an American story, and it is made possible, in my case and in a whole bunch of yours, by a good education, teachers who cared about your outcomes. It was made possible by work opportunities to develop and demonstrate your skills. And it was made possible by adults who involved themselves in key moments and key ways in my life. That is our agenda in this administration. Schools, jobs, civic engagement. It's not some abstract set of ideas. It's not policies that are unconnected to reality. It's about making the American story possible for you and your kids and a whole generation who are waiting to see whether my experience and the experience of people like me is some aberration, whether it really is possible for people to be judged and to move forward based on the content of their character and not the color of their skin. Now, that is why we are rolling out the Readiness Project. This whole effort to transform public education and assure consistent excellence in every public school. Outcomes that depend on your potential, not your zip code. That is why we are building job opportunities across the Commonwealth, and why we are asking you to take advantage of opportunities to build your skills so you can take advantage of the opportunities that are there. That is why we have an Office of Civic Engagement, why we are inviting people not to think that all you needed to do or all that I was asking you to do was to vote for me, but to check in and stay checked in, to move this agenda. That is why. Yes, we have an opportunities and agenda and access and opportunities agenda, and we should. We should be looking to ways to break down the barriers for people to get in to public service or to take advantage of state contracting opportunities. I'll give you one example. We are one of the largest concentrations of Hispanic-owned businesses anywhere in the country. But 1% of those businesses are Samba certified here in the Commonwealth. So we went to work. We started to revive Samba. There's a Cuban-owned business owned by a Cuban woman doing $400,000 in sales before we got to power. She got a $4.4 million contract from the University of Massachusetts last year. That's transformative. And we need to replicate that over and over and over again. That is why at the end of this legislative session, with the help of our colleagues in the legislature, when we have some $10 to $14 billion to start reinvesting in our roads and our bridges, in rebuilding public and community colleges and state universities, in recreating a platform for economic growth here in the Commonwealth, we need to be sure, and you need to help us be sure, that you get a piece of that you have a chance to bring your talents and skills and workforce to bear. This is a very promising time. There are a lot of people and a huge amount of talent in this room, finally willing to call out a truth you and I know.